What has happened to America, and to a lesser degree the rest of the world too? To put it in one fashion, why might we say the world has gone to you-know-where in a handbasket? Or that things have unraveled? Some might even say that the second coming is nigh here. Here are some ideas that I have concerning this. And it's a little unconventional and maybe sounds a little simplistic. But here are an idea or two. Now, from the movie series Star Wars, there's the idea of the fight between good and evil. And we all know, too, the concept of the addict and how they will do whatever it takes to get their fix, or fixes. But we typically talk then of addicts as being chemical-based addicts only, such as alcohol, marijuana sometimes, but more over meth, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, so on. And that thus the addict of these substances will do anything, and I mean anything, to get their fixes. Or so it is claimed. Perhaps, though, they will not wantonly kill or be sadistic, i.e. enjoy hurting others to get their fixes. That they have limits, thus. Hence the alcoholic person, so to speak, said to rather drink themselves to death, I suppose, rather than wantonly, shall we say, pillage others. That's just not their nature. But perhaps there is the type of addict who is unconcerned utterly with the welfare of others. Some say this is a lack of empathy, but my viewpoint currently, I hypothesize, shall we say, lack of empathy being really a matter of enjoying seeing others suffer, such that one's orientation to getting a fix in life doesn't go toward the chemical one, which doesn't necessarily impact that many people around you, but alternatively pursuit of various other addictions that have a massive impact upon many, many people, to the extent of starting wars, perpetuating wars, alienating and hurting others to the extent we have invasions and counter-response, even massive environmental degradation and destruction eventually of the planet, which is, I believe, far more than the impact of a, quote, alcoholic or heroin user upon the world at large, or the nation, or one's community. The impact is far more limited. Usually just to one's spouse or children, immediate family, or on a job place, their level of efficiency upon which they are simply fired. So if this type of addict, you might say in certain respects, any addict other than the chemical-based ones, if this addict basically has so little empathy, in other words, they enjoy seeing people suffer, well, then my speculation, my hypothesis is this, that the more weaponry they have available, the more toxic to their country and the environment and the world at large. Hence, by the way, Stephen Hawking, who wrote A Brief History of Time, the gentleman in a wheelchair since age 25 onward or so from ALS, Lou Gehrig's, who spoke eventually with a speech synthesizer until his death in his 70s recently. It said, we've got about 1,000 years to get off this planet, maybe to Mars, or we're going to go extinct. Well, he did not say why he thought that. In my hypothesis, my opinion, at current level, I'd say it's because of the non-chemically based addicts in the world, especially in our country, that are driving this speech to get off our planet, or, shall we say, driving most of the environmental degradation, most of the nuclear weaponry, most of the other massive weapons of destruction, and any invasions also upon our country as a result of what we are doing to get a variety of resources far outstripping what most other countries desire or crave or want as fixes, shall we say. And here then is where I hypothesize it possible, quite possible in fact, that America has so gone down the rabbit hole, so deteriorated. We might say it's rampant materialism, too many toys of choice, shall we say, too much population, too few resources, too little land now. But here is an idea also, that those who crave to get their fixes of a non-chemical based nature now have available since 1951 a new weapon of choice, shall we say. It used to be physical intimidation, even to the point of possible torture or actual torture. Used to be the possibility of losing your life, imprisonment, shortened lifespan, shall we say outright being assassinated. Imprisoned, did I mention that? Of course. But now, since 1951, a new tool of choice, shall we say. That tool being Thorazine and its derivatives. Thorazine, the first drug that released many people from, quote, mental hospitals by numbing their brain enough that they did not suffer immense rage and immense terror feelings, call it fear or catastrophizings, or some say paranoia, on a sufficient enough level most of the time in restricted settings, say at home or in their community, with financial supports. And so Thorazine was the first drug that could numb people's minds, along with everything else to follow, including, I believe, lithium, said to be the gold standard number, I would say, brain-numbing device for so-called bipolar people. And of course, in my opinion now, antidepressants, standard, as they're called, tranquilizers, etc., all performing the same function, even to a level ADHD drugs. Although I believe they function a little differently in that they speed up the mind rather than numb the mind, oftentimes. But at any rate then, these numbing drugs, out since 1951, the first was Thorazine, but then more and more the side effects of a permanent damaging nature to the brain, such as tardive dyskinesia, tic movements, if you will, more and more trimmed, such that first was the shift away from calling them antipsychotics, or rather major tranquilizers, to antipsychotics, and later accessories or adjuncts, shall you say, to depression. And they're being then used more and more like candy every day, almost like water. And so this numbing effect, in my opinion, covered, so to speak, from the eyes of the public in many cases, told simply that they are receiving medicine. And yet if you look at the persons receiving medicine of this nature, my only response is to say they have been zombified, they have been lobotomized, or you might say they have become Karen and Quinlan's brain dead while their body's still alive and able to walk and eat and talk to some extent, and of course smile too. They are technically not sleeping in bed, but they are sleeping on their feet while talking during day hours. Now it is said these people are able to function successfully in society, but in my opinion, from what I've seen of such individuals, that entails, at best, a very brilliant person, a very energetic person, reduced to bagging groceries at a box store, supermarket for decades, or maybe working at a fast food place. Or maybe, in some instances, raising children. Again, as a, quote, job, if you will, a housewife, so to speak. Also, there is no mention, of course, of the effect upon persons driving, car accidents, and so on. But in essence, their thinking processes have halted, except for the most mundane levels of existence, upon which they typically are declared handicapped with some kind of mental disability and given a check, maybe free housing or very reduced cost housing, and essentially warehoused away from the rest of society, or put in a very low-level position as an automaton in a box store or fast food restaurant, which I would call in many instances a restaurant box store. These individuals, seemingly calm under certain restricted circumstances. So you might say this can be like anything, good or bad, as used properly or improperly, and of course by whom. Alternatively speaking, who has the AK-47 in the neighborhood? Who has the most nuclear weapons or access to using them? Is it Gandhi or is it Hitler, so to speak? If the weapon called Thorazine or the power of Thorazine falls into the hand of a so-called Hitler or people with low empathy, and its implementation upon people termed medicine and the effects upon the brain as per thinking, emotionality, efficiency level, and so on, not mentioned, then it seems to me this is problematic. And what we seem to have more and more is a nation not of just potheads, but medheads, in my opinion. Zombies who are said to be taking their medicine either so that they can function again outside of, quote, mental hospitals, or seemingly not be a danger to anyone, so to speak, under limited circumstances. But the question, of course, level of danger to society, level of toxicity, very questionable in my mind. For in my opinion, there are many, many people who have never stepped foot in a psychiatrist's office, never taken a single psychiatric pill, who are not a danger to society at all in that kind of a oddball sense, because they are already harming society on a daily level, or have done so to others, including probably their own children and spouse, and other family members in the extended family. So all discussion of somebody potentially being a danger to society or going postal, in my mind, rather fallacious, rather almost ludicrous, if you consider that the people often saying this phrase, so-and-so could be a danger to society, or, quote, go postal, are often the very people who have already gone postal on a daily level as a way of living life, earning money included, and in terms of their internal family, children and spouse, for instance. They already go postal on a daily level by their activities. Only it is not labeled that, it's not labeled sociopathy. In fact, sociopathy is not even in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. So how can they be termed even sociopathic? Adding to that, then, we have no real definition of sociopathy, and it's even more confused by terms such as psychopath, or confusion then with, well, what is an antisocial personality disordered person on the other hand, which is in the DSM. So if we can't even define what is very toxic personality structure, how can we try to examine the phenomenon in general and the motivations, the impact, and so on? So at any rate, then, the more medheads, I would say, we have, the more zombies we have, the more atypical potheads we have who are zoned out and non-functional, but have a smile at times under limited circumstances where they are usually isolated from the world at large, or live a very supported lifestyle in general. This, in my mind, is a lion's share of why the world, but especially America, has gone to you-know-where in a handbasket. So you might say, all nations may go and expire at some point in time, have a life cycle, to include the Roman Empire and the British Empire. But I speculate this is a new phenomenon because all former, shall we say, degradations and use or misuse, rather, of power only had the limitations of ending someone's life, basically, or imprisoning them or torturing them. Now we have a new method since 1961 throughout the world and growing. It's to be able to shut down a person's mind, numb them, give them status as, quote, mentally disabled, give them a check, free housing, free transportation, free food, free everything, and then declare that basically they are not that unfunctional and they are simply taking medicine or meds, not numbing, shutdown type lobotomy drugs, which, generally speaking, is visible to the trained observer, shall we say, the acute observer, as someone really not quite up to snuff. There's something just seems off about the person. Just like if you see someone who is smoking marijuana, call it dope if you will, you would say, well, they look zoned out. Well, can't then the typical med user, the typical psychiatric drug user, to one extent or another, in many, many drug cases of this nature, be said to be zoned out also? Thoughts here, speculative in nature because of the number of people talking about this right now. I could be wrong. Maybe there's a lot of people talking about it. But at any rate, those are my views at age 62 now, of one very possible reason why America has struggled so much more in the past 50, 70 years. Thoughts here anyway. To the extent I'm wrong, well, maybe in time, of course, things tend to sort themselves out. And I do not say that I'm a trained professional or that anyone ought to jettison their, quote, medications or whatever you're going to call them cold turkey, any more than someone entering a rehab facility goes cold turkey off of heroin without a replacement. They will find it excruciating, if not death-inducing. And, of course, I am not a trained professional. I am not a, quote, medical doctor, as it is in the parlance to say then in this direction. My only response to all of this along those lines is twofold. First, the book by a Harvard-trained medical doctor, You Can't Afford to Get Sick. And second, the fact that perhaps what I say from a non-medical MD, non-PhD position is exactly what people need to hear, at least as an alternate thought or set of thoughts, that otherwise we hear what is the trained professional's viewpoint, the trained professional's morals, the trained professional's drugs of choice, everything from that angle, and their words, whereas everything about me is not of that direction. My viewpoints, my experiences are from problem solving, massive observation, a keen software package for reviewing, and keen mathematical abilities, plus Army time from West Point and onward, combat arms. That's my, quote, set of experiences that some may call a training experience. An alternate view then, based on a number of different factors that, in my mind, 99.9 or even 99.99% of medical doctors and PhD individuals in the, quote, helping professions for the emotional department, shall we say, probably are not in line with regarding me. And if they are, they're probably jettisoning their careers right and left and becoming life coaches and giving up their licenses to practice in the conventional sense, so no longer called medical doctors. And some, in fact, as life coaches, shall we say, no longer use their PhD credential even. Hence, I love to look at those who do not use their PhD credential, including the noted physicist, I believe Nobel Prize winner also, Richard Feynman, who wrote the book Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, when actually he had a doctorate degree, and Albert Einstein, who never used his term Dr. Einstein. At least I don't believe so, generally speaking. Thoughts here anyway to consider as food for thought, not definitive, not dogma, and subject to change because it's a hypothesis, not a fact that I'm claiming. In fact, I don't believe there is such a thing as a fact. If so, we might be amazed one day to wake up and discover we had been dreaming for the last 50 years. No guarantee that we're not. Thus, we don't even know as a fact whether we're asleep or awake.